Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
Prince Harry had prepared himself for locked doors, cold greetings, and carefully rehearsed conversations. He had not prepared for the empty wall. Inside Kensington Palace, in a corridor filled with generations of royal faces, the space where his portrait had once hung was already bare. No announcement had been delivered. No explanation had been offered. Yet before anyone spoke a single word, Harry understood that a decision about his place in the family had already been made. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry had arrived without warning after receiving a brief message requesting a private family discussion. He expected tension, but believed the invitation might open a narrow path back toward his father and brother. Kensington Palace was more than a royal residence. It was a working home tied to duty, memory, and public identity, and the portrait corridor marked who still belonged within that history. The empty space destroyed that hope. Harry stopped outside the private apartments and stared at the lighter rectangle left behind. 2 mounting marks remained exposed. His official portrait had been removed before he arrived, not shifted, covered, or placed aside for cleaning. The message was plain. Someone had decided that his face no longer belonged beside the family he had once represented. Harry turned toward a nearby equerry, a palace officer assigned to assist senior royals, and kept his voice calm. "Who ordered this?" The courtier lowered his eyes. He adjusted the papers in his hands but gave no answer. That silence cut deeper than an accusation, because it proved the removal was known, coordinated, and protected. Humiliation replaced shock. Harry stepped closer and touched the pale outline where the frame had rested. His fingers remained against the wall. Then he pulled them away as though the stone had rejected him. He remembered standing there years earlier, when his future seemed fixed, and William felt like the one person who would never let the institution erase him. A whispered exchange nearby revealed the timing. Staff had completed the removal early that morning, hours before most of the household learned Harry was approaching. Someone had expected him. Someone had wanted the empty space ready. William was inside the palace. The future king had been present while the portrait came down, but no one would say whether he approved the order, ignored it, or arrived too late to stop it. Harry refused to move. Behind a closed door, footsteps grew louder. The portrait had disappeared in silence, but the people responsible for that silence were now gathering only a few rooms away. The empty wall was not merely an insult to Prince Harry. It was the latest wound in a relationship once defined by shared loss, private jokes, and an unspoken promise that 2 brothers would protect each other against the pressures of royal life. Now William stood deeper inside Kensington Palace, knowing Harry had seen what was missing. Between them lay years of accusation, disappointment, and one unbearable question. Had the future king finally chosen the institution over his own brother? William sat in a study, holding a briefing that confirmed Harry had arrived and discovered the removal. As heir to the throne, the person next in line to become monarch, he carried responsibility for Kensington Palace's public identity. Every portrait now spoke for the crown's future. Yet this decision did not feel constitutional. It felt personal. William folded the paper once and placed it beside him. He remained seated. Protecting the monarchy from renewed accusation mattered, because one careless symbol could reopen years of conflict. But allowing Harry's image to vanish without warning looked less like protection and more like cruelty. The future king knew the difference, even if the palace machinery pretended not to. Harry remained in the corridor, trapped by a memory he could not silence. He remembered the day the portrait had first been installed, when he and William had joked about their stiff expressions. Kensington represented childhood, duty, and their bond with Diana. Though Harry had stepped away from royal work, he had never stopped seeing those walls as part of the life their mother had tried to hold together. Catherine entered the study quietly. The Princess of Wales, the title held by the wife of the direct heir, watched William's face before speaking. She told him that leaving Harry unanswered would deepen the wound beyond anything a palace statement could repair. William resisted, warning that any private exchange could become another public weapon. She answered quietly that silence had already become one. Charles had known about a broader review of palace portraits, according to a written briefing circulated through his private office. The king had approved the review in principle, but he had not authorized the timing of Harry's removal. A senior household official had accelerated the change after receiving a private instruction tied to an earlier family dispute, and that hidden order now threatened to divide everyone involved. William rose at last. He rejected the idea of sending an aide and moved toward the corridor himself, though he still had no answer ready. Before the brothers could face each other, the palace would have to confront the incident that turned a symbolic review into a calculated act of exclusion. The portrait had not been removed because of one interview, one memoir, or one angry telephone call. The final decision began during a private dinner at Windsor, 3 weeks earlier, when an attempt at reconciliation collapsed before the first course was finished. What happened around that table never appeared in a palace statement, yet one sentence from Harry changed the atmosphere instantly, leaving Charles silent, William furious, and a senior courtier convinced that the Duke's image could no longer remain untouched inside a working royal residence. Charles had arranged the dinner without advisors, cameras, or negotiators. He wanted to test whether a limited family reconciliation could survive one honest evening. Windsor was not simply another residence. It was a royal home tied to continuity, duty, and the private life of the crown. The king believed that meeting there might remind both sons of what still connected them. William arrived reluctantly. The future king suspected Harry would use the meal to demand restored privileges, rather than rebuild trust. Harry sensed that resistance immediately, but he had come carrying more than emotion. Before the first course, he placed a sealed folder beside Charles and asked for written guarantees that Meghan and their children would receive formal recognition in future palace displays and ceremonial records. The official lists used to define who appears in royal events and family history. Harry's demand changed everything. He warned that continued exclusion would eventually become part of another public account. William pushed his chair back so sharply that the scrape silenced the room. He accused his brother of turning reconciliation into leverage. Harry answered that he was protecting his family from being erased. Charles did not shout. The monarch removed his glasses, closed the folder without reading the final page, and told his younger son that affection could not be negotiated through threats. Harry felt cornered and misunderstood. He insisted the request was protection, not blackmail, but he refused to withdraw the warning. William heard only confirmation that no private exchange could remain safe. A documented recommendation followed the dinner. The keeper of the royal collection, the official responsible for preserving and displaying royal objects, proposed removing images of non-working royals from sensitive residential areas before the next palace review. Days later, someone added a handwritten instruction. Harry's portrait must come down before any future visit, not afterward. Only 3 people had access to that amended paper. One had already entered Kensington. Another was inside the king's office. The third was now approaching the corridor where Harry waited alone. The private dinner explained why the portrait was vulnerable, but only a face-to-face confrontation could reveal who decided Harry should witness its disappearance. When William finally entered the corridor, neither brother offered a greeting. Harry stood beneath the empty mounting hooks, while the air stopped several feet away, refusing to look directly at the wall. Years of carefully managed distance vanished in an instant. There were no press secretaries, no prepared statements, and no protective line of courtiers between them. Harry asked one direct question, and the hesitation before William's answer hurt more than any accusation could have done. William ordered the remaining palace staff to leave. The future king waited until the final door closed, then faced Harry alone. The corridor mattered because it connected the private apartments to rooms used for official family business. Its portraits were not decoration alone. They quietly declared who still stood inside the working life of the crown. Harry pointed toward the pale rectangle. "Did you tell them to take me down?" William answered that the display was under review. The reply sounded careful, polished, and empty. Harry stepped closer. He said he had not asked whether the corridor was being reorganized. He had asked whether his own brother wanted his face removed before meeting him. William's jaw tightened. He accused Harry of treating every private exchange as material that might later become public, turning family pain into another weapon against the monarchy. Harry struck back without raising his voice. He said the palace had removed him because erasing a portrait was easier than admitting what had driven him away. The words landed hard. Kensington held memories of Diana, their childhood, and the years when both brothers believed loyalty would protect them from the institutions surrounding them. William finally admitted the truth. He had approved the wider portrait policy, a formal rule deciding which family members could appear in working royal spaces. He had not chosen that morning for the removal, but when he learned the work had begun, he did nothing to stop it. Harry dragged a chair from the opposite wall and placed it beneath the empty hooks. He sat down slowly, refusing to be moved again. Catherine opened the corridor door and saw both men. The Princess of Wales, William's wife and a senior working royal, understood at once that her presence would harden the confrontation. She met his eyes, then closed the door without speaking. William watched the door shut, his anger weakened into something closer to shame. He told Harry that the timing had come from the king's private office. Neither brother moved, because naming Charles had shifted the blame without easing either man's pain. The confrontation had exposed William's silence, but the greater question now waited behind another palace door. What had Charles truly ordered? Royal power rarely announces itself with shouting. It moves through notes, schedules, signatures, and instructions delivered in language designed to hide their emotional consequences. The removal of Harry's portrait had passed through that machinery with remarkable speed. Yet when the paper trail reached Charles, the truth became more complicated than either son expected. The king had authorized a review. He had approved a principle. But somewhere between his pen and the palace wall, a bureaucratic decision had become a deeply personal punishment. Charles sat in a private room with the implementation sheet open before him. Palace displays followed a clear chain of authority. The monarch held final symbolic control. William shaped decisions inside Kensington, and senior household officials carried out the work. The review had been presented as modernization, a policy separating active working royals from relatives no longer performing public duties. On paper, it sounded orderly. In practice, it had humiliated his son. Charles read the handwritten note twice. It instructed staff to remove the portrait before Harry's next visit, not after. The monarch looked toward the official standing opposite him and asked who had added it. The answer came quietly. Sir Michael Harcourt, the senior household secretary responsible for turning palace decisions into action. Sir Michael explained that removing the frame beforehand was administratively cleaner. Charles set down his pen. He repeated the phrase slowly, almost as if testing whether cruelty sounded less cruel when wrapped in office language. It did not. The king's anger remained controlled, but the silence that followed made the room feel smaller. William entered moments later and confronted Sir Michael directly. The future king learned that his earlier silence had been interpreted as consent. Because he had not challenged the portrait policy, staff assumed he supported its harshest execution. William understood then that hesitation had become authority. By refusing to stop the process, he had allowed others to act in his name. Harry still waited beneath the empty hooks. His anger had begun to sink into sadness. The decision no longer looked like one person's hatred. It looked worse. A system moving forward, because no one had cared enough to pause it. That realization stripped the moment of even the comfort of a clear enemy. Charles then learned the portrait had not entered routine storage. Staff had wrapped it and placed it in a secure room, awaiting his final decision. He ordered the frame brought into the family meeting immediately. No aide spoke, because everyone understood that the frame had become evidence against them. The portrait was no longer merely missing. It was now being carried back toward the men whose choices had stripped it from the wall. The wrapped portrait entered the room before Charles did. Two attendants carried it carefully, unaware that the object between them had become more dangerous than any confidential file. Harry watched the frame being placed against a cabinet, its face still covered. William remained near the window. Neither brother moved toward it. The picture had returned, but the family it represented no longer existed in the same form, and everyone in the room understood that rehanging it would not erase what had happened. Charles entered and dismissed the attendants. The king kept only Harry and William inside, because this was no longer a matter for staff. The covered frame represented more than an official likeness. It held a younger son who once believed royal duty, family loyalty, and personal identity would remain joined. Harry recognized the outline beneath the cloth. His anger softened into grief. The portrait showed him before the departures, accusations, and public battles, when Kensington still felt like home and the future seemed secure. The removal had not only questioned his current role, it had reached backward and judged the man he had once been. Charles accepted responsibility, without hiding behind procedure. He said his authorization had created the conditions for the portrait to come down, even though he had never approved the humiliating timing. Harry refused the apology. He said the palace always separated intention from consequence, whenever he was the one left carrying the pain. William stepped away from the window. The future king admitted that he knew the review included Harry and chose not to intervene because he feared another battle. His silence, he said, had been cowardice disguised as caution. Harry listened, but forgiveness did not come. Charles then confirmed the immediate fallout. Sir Michael had been removed from all family-facing decisions pending an internal investigation, a formal inquiry used to determine who acted, why they acted, and whether rules were broken. Every planned portrait change had been suspended. The king delivered a harder truth. The frame could not automatically return to its former position because the corridor had been redesignated for working members of the royal family, relatives who represent the monarch in public duties. Harry stood and pulled back the cloth. He stared at his painted face, then said quietly, "That man no longer exists." Charles lowered his eyes. William did not answer. Harry turned toward his brother and asked for a conversation, not as heir and duke, but as the two boys who had stood together beneath that same roof. For the first time that day, the argument moved away from policy, staff, and royal rank, leaving only two brothers and the history neither could remove. Harry and William entered a small adjoining room with no aides, no recording secretary, and no portrait of any monarch watching over them. The door closed, and the silence that followed felt different from the silence in the corridor. This was not institutional restraint. It was fear. Both men understood that one careless sentence could destroy what remained between them. Yet for the first time in years, neither was speaking to defend a title. They were speaking as Diana's sons. William closed the door himself and placed both phones on a side table. A recording secretary, the official who normally creates a written account of formal meetings, had been deliberately excluded. No aide could interrupt them at all. No document could soften what followed. The future king remained standing until Harry finally spoke. Harry admitted that the empty wall had made him feel judged beyond the present. He said it had reduced his childhood, military service, and place beside their mother to something disposable. Kensington had held their grief after Diana's death, and seeing his image removed from those walls felt like being cut away from her memory as well. William listened without defending the palace. Then he confessed that Harry's departure and public accusations had left him feeling abandoned during the hardest years of preparing for kingship. The prince said every crisis had arrived while he was learning to carry a role that allowed no escape. He had needed his brother, and Harry had seemed determined to speak from the outside. Harry looked away, but he did not interrupt. William moved a chair closer instead of remaining across the room. That small act changed the exchange. He explained that he had never wanted Harry erased from the family's private history. He wanted a boundary between affection and formal royal representation, the official way the monarchy shows who currently performs duties for the crown. Harry accepted that the portrait could not promise restored status. He also insisted that removal could never become punishment. William agreed. The brothers reached a distinction neither had expected. The frame would not return to the working royal corridor. Instead, it would move to a private family gallery containing photographs linked to Diana, their childhood, and the years before royal duty divided them. William promised to walk beside Harry when the portrait was relocated. Staff would not hide the act behind closed doors again. The brothers reopened the door together. Charles waited beside the uncovered frame, and the king understood their decision before either son spoke. Their compromise would settle the family dispute. But once the empty wall became public, the palace could no longer control what the country believed it represented. By evening, the empty wall had escaped Kensington Palace. A staff photograph, taken before the corridor was sealed, showed the pale rectangle, exposed hooks, and Harry standing beneath them with his hands clenched at his sides. Within minutes, the image became larger than the family dispute itself. To some, it proved the monarchy had become ruthless. To others, it showed the inevitable consequence of walking away from duty. Britain was no longer discussing a portrait. It was judging belonging. Palace officials responded with careful language. They confirmed that an internal display review had taken place, but refused to discuss private family conversations. An internal review meant a formal examination of palace practices and decisions, yet the explanation sounded weak beside the photograph. The public saw a brother standing beneath an empty space, not an administrative process. Catherine watched the coverage beside William. The Princess of Wales, the wife of the direct heir, told him the image made Harry look deliberately ambushed, whatever the paperwork said. William did not argue. He knew public trust often turned on one unforgettable moment, and this image had stripped away every polished explanation. Mourning made the damage larger. The Daily Chronicle, a fictional national newspaper, printed the empty rectangle across its front page beneath the headline, "Erased before he arrived." Outside Kensington Palace, a broadcaster described the scandal as the monarchy's unresolved struggle between blood and duty. The words spread quickly because they captured the contradiction at the heart of the crown. A crowd gathered near the palace gates. One woman held an old photograph of Diana with both sons and said, whatever they became, she would never have wanted one removed from the other. Her words drew applause. Nearby, royal supporters answered that official walls could not permanently honor people who no longer served the monarch. The country divided around a single frame. Charles understood the silence could not continue. The king approved a carefully worded statement confirming that Harry's image would remain within the private family collection. A family collection meant objects kept for personal history rather than official public representation. The message made clear that his son had lost a working place, not his place in royal memory. Harry read the statement alone before leaving Kensington. He did not smile, but his shoulders relaxed when he reached the words, "family collection." William then arrived at the private gallery carrying the portrait himself. He refused to let attendants move it. This time, no hidden instruction would decide where his brother belonged again. The public argument had turned the empty wall into a national symbol, but the final meaning would be decided in a quieter room beyond public view. The final act did not occur before cameras, beneath balcony flags, or inside a room prepared for royal ceremony. It happened in a private gallery, where photographs of Diana, childhood holidays, military milestones, and family weddings carried no constitutional authority. William lifted Harry's portrait into place while Charles watched from several steps away. The frame would never return to its original corridor. Yet in choosing where it belonged, the family finally confronted a truth the empty wall had exposed. Duty could change, but history could not be erased. William positioned the frame beside a photograph of himself and Harry walking behind Diana. The private gallery preserved family memory rather than official status. Nothing placed there promised duty, rank, or influence. It simply acknowledged that the past remained part of the family, always. Harry studied the new placement in silence. The move did not restore his former role, but it protected something deeper. His place in the story they had shared before titles and public battles divided them. Charles watched both sons and said the monarchy must separate official representation from emotional belonging, without turning either into a weapon. The future king admitted that removing the portrait without speaking to Harry first had been wrong, no matter who accelerated the order. Harry accepted his part in the distrust, acknowledging that earlier disclosures had made private reconciliation harder. Consequences followed. Sir Michael resigned from his household position. Future symbolic changes would require family notification, and the working royal corridor would remain reserved for active representatives of the crown. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties for the monarch, and Harry no longer occupied that role. No one pretended the wounds had healed. William offered no restoration, and Harry left without regaining formal status. Their victory was smaller but real. They had spoken honestly, set boundaries, and rejected symbolic humiliation. The three men left the gallery together. Harry paused, looked back once at the rehung frame, and allowed the door to close without turning again. The removed portrait ended his expectation that he could occupy the same institutional place after leaving royal duty. Yet its relocation proved that changed responsibility did not require erased history. He remained a prince by birth, a son and brother by blood, but no longer a central figure on the working walls of the crown. The empty space remained in the public corridor, but it no longer represented rejection. It represented a boundary finally acknowledged, and a family connection, damaged but deliberately preserved elsewhere. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.